This is Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. When you were growing up, did you go to school with kids from the same family who kind of seemed to be everywhere? Let me tell you what I'm talking about. So maybe there was a kid in your grade, maybe a couple older siblings too, and all of them were so popular or so smart. And you just thought, how did that one family produce all those athletes, or the valedictorian and the star of the school musical? I know I had one of these families in my grade school growing up. I'm guessing maybe you did too. Our guest today, Susan Dominus, has long been fascinated by family dynamics. So fascinated that she wrote a book about them, which came out in March. It's called The Family Dynamic: A Journey into the Mystery of Sibling Success. Susan is also a staff writer at the New York Times Magazine, where she often writes long-form stories that explore psychology, neuroscience, relationships, and families. She joins us today from New York. Susan, welcome to Vermont Edition.
Thank you so much for having me. It's
Yeah,
a pleasure to be here.
We're very excited to talk to you about this book today. I really loved reading it. And in your book, Susan, you profile a half dozen or so families, and we are joined today by two sisters from our region whose family is the subject of the book's very first chapter. That is Lauren Groff and Sarah True. Lauren is an acclaimed novelist and a 3-time nominee for a National Book Award. Her novels include Fates and Furies, Matrix, and The Vaster Wilds. And her short stories have been published in magazines like The New Yorker and The Atlantic. And she's joining us today from Orford, New Hampshire. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
And we are also joined from Lebanon, New Hampshire by Lauren, your sister, Sarah True. She's a triathlete and 2-time Olympian, as well as a PhD student in clinical psychology and an Ironman competitor. A few years ago, when her child was just 2 years old, she won the Ironman European Championship in Frankfurt. Sarah, I can't imagine doing anything while you're also raising a 2-year-old. So I am just so impressed by that one. Welcome to Vermont Edition.
Thanks for having me.
And listeners, you can join this conversation as well. If you have thoughts on the sibling dynamics that we're discussing today, or have your own story from your family to share, call in at 800-639-2211 or email vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Sarah, let's start with you and your own family. I'm going to put you in the hot spot for a minute here before we get to Lauren and Sarah. How did your own upbringing influence your interest in this topic of sibling and family dynamics?
Oh, yes.
Susan, yes.
Yes. How did I get interested in the topic? Is that what you mean?
Yes, how did your own upbringing
yeah,
influence your interest?
I would say that I my parents used to travel a lot when I was little. And so I stayed with really close family friends from time to time. And first of all, when you actually live with another family, you really do get a sense of how incredibly varied other family cultures can be from your own. And I stayed with one in particular that we were really close to. And like they were very much a family that at the dinner table did math games and talked about current events, all of which I found like sort of entertaining, but also slightly terrifying. But also, something that I realized was possibly going to really feed those kids in some important intellectual way. And although I was very relieved to come home, I always thought like, wow, how does family culture affect accomplishment or confidence? Are there actually things that parents can do to set their kids on a path for success?
Mm. And Susan, I'm sorry, I did not set you on a path for success by calling you by the wrong name in the very first question.
Oh, that's okay. I was very eager to hear what Sarah had to say too. So it would have been fine either way.
Well, one thing I loved, Susan, about just reading the introduction of your book was hearing not only about your own upbringing, but also the ways in which you started to think more deeply about this topic as you became a parent yourself. Can you tell us about your own family and your boys?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things actually I would say I saw about my own boys is I have fraternal twins, and I think parents of fraternal twins really are keenly aware of the limits of parenting because you feed them the same food every day, you read them the same stories every day, and yet they come out completely different. And so then you start to wonder, well, how much are they influencing each other?
Yeah.
Are they ending up so different in part because they're reacting to each other? You appreciate the limits of what your own parenting can do, and you start to really see or wonder at least about how much siblings affect each other.
Mm. And as you started to dive into this topic, you started reaching out, trying to find participants, folks who would let you into their family's inner circle for a bit and discuss these family dynamics with you, which can often feel very both central to your character, but also private once you start really talking about them. What was it like finding participants in this informal study of yours?
I sometimes think that many of the families would not have agreed to speak to me if they'd realized that I was still going to be calling them 5, 6, 7 years later. So it was a little bit of a frog in boiling water, which is I did not anticipate myself. I mean, all sorts of things happened along the way that kind of made it, including the pandemic, that made it. There was a moment during the pandemic when I just thought, is this the right book to be working on right now? What do I think about all of this? But I was really lucky to find people who were, particularly with the Groffs. I think it's not a coincidence that Sarah is getting her PhD in psychology. These are people who are really, this is a family that's very thoughtful and self-aware and I think open about all kinds of issues related to mental health in a way that's really helpful for other people.
Mm. Yes, and Lauren and Sarah, you also have a older brother, Adam, whose story is discussed in this book as well. But since we have you two here today, I want to hear how you two first felt when Susan reached out to you with this idea for her book, and the interest in your sibling dynamic. Lauren, did you meet this topic with excitement or trepidation or a mix of both?
Well, I love Sue's work before I'd ever even talked to her. I had been following what she'd done for the New York Times Magazine, and I just thought she's so amazing. And so when she reached out, I think it was really, really early in the process before things had maybe even congealed around the central idea. I said, absolutely, I'll talk to you for the rest of my life. I'm really happy to talk. And we just had I mean, Sue has visited us many times. She came to my bookstore. I mean, she's now a friend of the family, and I trusted her. So it is. I mean, it's hard to give someone your story, particularly when it's really tender and sensitive. And every family story is tender and sensitive. But I trusted Sue.
Yeah. Sarah, how did you feel? Were you feeling similar about this request?
Well, I think my initial thought was, we're just a normal family. Why does she want to talk to us? Because the way we interact, the way we are with each other, we're just a family. It's not as though we talk about our accomplishments and just we're as messy as any other family. So, there was this piece of me that was a little resistant that shouldn't you be saving your time, Sue, for somebody who actually deserves this? For genuinely successful family, not a messy one like ours.
What family is not messy?
I know.
Well, Susan, that's one of the things I loved about reading this book is that you profile families, including the Groffs, and similar to them in that they have the siblings are so driven, so successful in so many ways, but are also real three-dimensional people with their own struggles and their own dynamics that can often be difficult within the family. And I wonder if you thought about that maybe with other families that you were profiling and the importance for listener or for readers, excuse me, of being able to read about families that aren't solely aspirational but also feel real.
Yeah, it is so funny because every once in a while I would find myself running up against a difficult fact of family life in one of the families I was writing about. I mean, to be perfectly frank, I think it took me a while to really hear from one of the families that I wrote about that their mother was actually physically abusive. I mean, they were telling it to me, but I wasn't hearing it. It sort of maybe didn't fall into my sense of the book that I was writing. And at a certain point, I had to recognize, actually, one of the siblings said to me finally, I don't really see how you can write about our family without writing about this. And I didn't want to cause pain to anyone in the family, but it's, the truth is that there is pain. Abuse happens in obviously not high achieving families as well. Raising children is a struggle. Raising children as immigrants, as this family, were, there are real challenges. And I finally realized that if I'm trying to tell anything truthful, you have to talk about all of it. And sometimes people say to me, "Oh, I'm nervous to read your book because it's going to make me feel bad about my own parenting." And I say, look, I wrote a truthful book and there's no perfect family. And these families were incredibly generous and open with me about the things in their lives that they found challenging. And so in some cases, these kids did extraordinary things. It's a combination of in spite of and because of, and, it's just complicated. Families are complicated. And to accomplish really great things is also a complicated endeavor.
Do you see this as a parenting book?
In the end, I don't. I sort of see it as a book about the experience of being human and a little bit about the nature of success and why we want it and what it costs and whether it's worth it and for whom it's worth it. I think I always say that parenting advice should come with a caveat, don't try this at home. I'm sure there are great parenting advice books out there, but I think this is a more contemplative book, I would say that has really almost a kind of, I hope, a novelistic pleasure to it in the sense that the stories are really detailed and human and narrative.
Yeah. Um, one of the things that I was wondering about before I even opened the book, when I just looked at the name, was how is this book going to balance these kind of two aspects of parenting that I hear about a lot in American culture, which is I want my kids to be happy. That's my primary goal. And Susan, you write about this very eloquently in the book. And I want my kids to be successful. I want them to maybe be more successful than I was, or I want them to be ambitious. And those two things don't always go well together. But sometimes they can. And I'm wondering what all three of your thoughts are on this about how a parent, particularly a parent with multiple children, can balance the desire to help their children be happy and this ambition that you come back to again and again in the book, Susan.
I mean, I'll start by saying that very few of the parents in this book, and I think parents reading it should be relieved, none of them were helicopter parents. I mean, they really weren't. They were parents who put opportunities in front of their children. They're trying to kind of harness their kids' passion and give them opportunities to stumble into passion, I would say. They were living in places where those kinds of opportunities were available to them. But they weren't the kind of parents who felt it was their job to, quote unquote, make their kid more something or generally speaking. And I think when parents start to think that way, like, oh, I need to make my kid grittier. I need to make my kid more conscientious. As soon as you're starting to kind of think of that language, I think it's a recipe towards making your kid less happy,
Yeah.
So I think parents in these families did imbue their kids with a sense that, sure, go for it. You can do whatever you want. And there's an extra drive that comes from various places in each of the families, I would say. But I think in general, my advice to parents is, don't over involve yourself in your kids' achievements because you really run the risk of demotivating them. We know that research suggests that when parents do get overly involved, kids do get demotivated. It takes away their intrinsic motivation. But also, let other people, let the coach, let the mentor, let a role model do the work of instilling discipline, for example, and make sure that your home is a safe and loving place to return to, because probably that's the thing that you care most about is the relationship.
Lauren, what do you think of that? And was ambition part of your upbringing?
Not necessarily. So I'm raising two teenagers at the moment. So Sue's book is actually really germane to my
Hmm.
everyday life. But to be perfectly honest, I see my parents as providing a really gentle landing spot and an openness to failure and seeing it not as failure. And I think that maybe that's like a redefinition of success in a certain point. One thinks of success as sort of in the capitalist system as attaining goals. But that wasn't really, in my perspective, the thing that differentiated maybe my parents. They were fine. They were happy with us having goals. They wanted us to have goals, but they were actually incredibly gentle and kind when it came to our quote unquote failures. Right? They allowed us a safe landing space. They allowed us the ability to learn, and they didn't step in too early. I mean, they really let us fall on our faces quite a lot. And I think that kind of, I jokingly call it benign neglect, but it is like really not, it's not benign at all. It's really positive, joyous, sort of open-hearted understanding that failure is not failure. Failure is just learning.
Sarah, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that Sue really nailed it on the head, where it's about letting your child find something that they're passionate about, with the recognition that with that passion is going to come some happiness, but also some sadness. The whole gamut of emotions. That it's really more about finding sense of purpose and fulfillment in what you do, rather than happiness is a it's fleeting. But at the end of the day, if your child can find something that they really find a lot of meaning for themselves, that is far more important. And that's going to be something they carry with them for the rest of their lives.
Hmm. Let's pause here for just a short break. When we come back, we will continue our conversation on family dynamics and sibling dynamics in particular with the writers Susan Dominus, Lauren Groff, and Sarah True. We will also hear from a pair of Vermont brothers who come from a very large family. That's in just a minute. Stay with us.
Thanks for listening to Vermont Edition, where support comes from Wendell's Furniture, home of wendellsdeals.com, offering furniture designed for a range of budgets, in stock and ready for summer. wendellsdeals.com. And Vermont Construction's roofing division, offering roof installation and repair with free estimates on asphalt and standing seam metal roofs. Now serving all of Vermont and northern New York. More at vtroofing.com.
Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Today on the show, we are discussing the new book, The Family Dynamic, A Journey into the Mystery of Sibling Success. It's by Susan Dominus, a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine. We're also joined by two sisters in New Hampshire who Susan featured in the book, the novelist Lauren Groff and the triathlete Sarah True. How have your siblings shaped who you are? What have you learned from them? Give us a call and tell us about it at 800-639-2211 or send us an email to vermontedition@vermontpublic.org. Sarah and Lauren, you two and your brother Adam each followed such different career paths. As kids, did you make a conscious choice to start focusing on different things? Was there like a sense of competitiveness there that led to that bifurcation? Or do you think it was the result of just your own natural inclinations and interests? Sarah, True, let's start with you.
It's funny because as the youngest, I think in the back of my mind there's this image of, I guess for a bit of context, my I went to Middlebury College, and my background's more environmental science. And one of the things we learned about was, in the same tree, you can have three different species of similar birds. And basically, like, there are these little microclimates where they're like, okay, I'm going to take the bottom part of the tree because that's really all that's left. And I'm going to focus on the grubs that live down here. So, really, like, I think there is a piece of me that I ended up focusing on the bottom part of the tree because, my brother and my sister, they're older. They figured,
Wait,
okay,
wait,
these
wait.
are
Is the
our
bottom part of the
niches.
tree the Olympics? Okay, that's a crazy tree.
Or you're getting a psychology PhD. Huh. I don't know.
That's where you get the juiciest grubs.
Okay.
I
No, but
disagree.
I think there's a sense where I grew up feeling like my siblings were already pretty well established in these other parts, these other domains, and just figuring out carving out a little niche for myself.
Hmm. Lauren, did you also feel like you needed to carve out a niche from yourself, separate from your older brother, Adam, who went on to become a doctor and an entrepreneur?
Yeah, well, so for a long time when I was a kid, I kept telling everybody that I wanted to be a pediatrician, and everybody just laughed at me because I was this hypersensitive, almost like skinless kid who cried every day for every reason. And people are like, you couldn't possibly deal with sick children day in and day out. It would kill you. I also read 4,000 books a day, right? So like it was just ludicrous, the idea that I would go into, medicine, curing other people when I couldn't cure myself. And to be honest, I had literary aspirations from the time that I could read. It was just like a secret in my heart from day one, and it wasn't in reaction to my brother. It was just the space in the world that felt most open and vibrant and specific in living for me. But I was also an athlete, right? And I was not bad at science, right? Like Sarah could have chosen. Sarah, she won't tell you, but she's also an exquisite artist, right? So she could have chosen any path in life, and this is the one that sort of lit her soul on fire. Yeah, it wasn't just, she chose the juiciest grubs from the bottom branches. It was, she found the passion there. And
Yeah.
that's not something that you can plan for, I think.
Yeah. Does this conversation, Susan, echo others that you had with other sibling pairs about whether or not to follow in an older sibling's path or to carve your own way?
I mean, it was interesting because the siblings, had an influence. Sometimes, you saw differentiation happening, but sometimes you saw like what I call a network effect among the siblings. So all of the Murguia siblings who went on to be, very nationally prominent figures in one way or another, having come from a very, very modest upbringing as children of immigrants in Kansas City, Kansas. They all went to law school. And so because they'd all gone to law school, even as their careers varied a little bit, they were similar enough that they were really able to help each other and use each other as resources. And they moved in the same world. They spoke the same language. And so in their case, I thought the similarities among them and in their training and in their frames of reference really helped them each to succeed, maybe more than they would have had one become an artist and one become an athlete. And they were coming from a real place of financial disadvantage, so they didn't have it just was very helpful to them in particular to have those connections right there among their sibling relationships.
Well, we have one more pair of siblings to bring in here. 2 of the 7 Kiernan siblings. First, we have Stephen Kiernan, who's a novelist and journalist in Charlotte. He is the 6th of 7. Stephen, hi.
How are you today?
Doing well. I hear you are on a ferry. Where are you going?
I'm coming back from visiting a college friend on Martha's Vineyard, and so I was trying to take this phone in the toolbox because it was quiet. Sit down in the basement, and now I'm up on deck because the cell service is a little thin. So I hope I can stay with you the whole conversation.
All right, we'll work with you. We also have your brother Mike on the line. Mike is an ER physician at Porter Medical Center in Middlebury, as well as the founder of Be the Change, which creates pollinator-friendly habitats. He is the 5th sibling in the family. Mike, welcome.
It's been a little more audible.
All right.
So,
So you all are part of a family of 7 siblings born within 10 years. And I understand that you just met up for a big family reunion. Stephen, how was that?
It was fantastic. It was interesting because the past reunions we've had have been really about us, the 7 of us, and now it's changed because we've had kids, and it's really like a love fest among them with their new spouses, and a lot of, let's say a third of the people that were there were under the age of 6. So it's shifting, and we're definitely like the old people. It's still great to have a whole ton. We're almost 70 of us there. It was really a blast.
Wow. And I can imagine that it can be a real struggle to find your own space in a large family. We were talking about that a little bit before you two joined. Um, Mike, was there sibling rivalry amongst you all?
I think that a lot of people wondered what was driving our family members, and people thought your parents must have put so much pressure on you. It's like, no, it's my siblings. I have to keep up with my siblings. And so the question becomes, is it a supportive, loving rivalry? Is it a competition that brings more from you and gets you to your tasks and keeps you at it? And there's rivalry that can be destructive. And interestingly, even in this reunion we just had, there's all of the oldest cousins who are now 35 to 45, and they're all bent over managing their little children. So the ones who are 26 to 31 had their little moment of sunlight. And I think the tree metaphor was a great one that I just heard the folks using. And there's also a forest metaphor, like you have to find your patch of sky. And, it's wonderful if people could do the exact same thing, the Allman Brothers, and manage to, do something with it. But I think it's lovely also to have this rivalry and this respect where you allow one another their little patch of sky.
Hmm. And Stephen, as the
Honestly,
youngest brother, oh, go ahead. Did you have
Yes.
something to add there?
Well, I just think, ironically, it was actually kind of liberating. When I was in college trying to decide my major, I had two older brothers attending Harvard Law School. So there was not a question of competing. They'd already won, But what it did was free me to do what I really wanted to be doing, which was storytelling and finding a way to make a life at that. And I still wanted to do it at the highest level I could. But, as my brother Greg writes me he made a long letter after every one of my books, and after he's read it. It's just an incredibly sweet thing and supportive. Even though he went to Harvard Law School, I don't hold it against him.
Well, Mike,
Wow.
you told our producer that you were reflecting recently and that you see your siblings as the sources of your most confident decisions. You described them as the wind in your sails. What's an example of that?
My earliest recollection is being carried around by people too young to be carrying a baby and being plopped down, and they said, "Say something funny, Michael." There was a sort of love and support and audience that I grew up with that was so approving that when I look at my life, it was interesting that she was asking a question about it, because I had been reflecting about those things in my life where I'd been fearful, because we are all fearful of things. And those times when I'd stepped through that fear to something that was right for me, I really credit those people who were definitely my supporters from the very first moment I drew breath.
Hmm. Well, Mike and Stephen Kiernan, thank you so much for calling in. Stephen, enjoy that ferry ride, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thanks. Susan Dominus, I'm wondering if anything stands out to you from that conversation with Stephen and Mike that picks up on themes in your book, The Family Dynamic. There are a couple of through lines that you pull throughout these stories of very different families.
I think that it can be. First of all, of course, they did acknowledge this notion of differentiation, but I really was struck, but when one of the brothers said, parents must have been really driving you, and he said, no, it was the siblings, and that was something I heard in general, that people think that the parents are putting this top-down pressure on the kids, but the siblings are much closer to each other in proximity, and they're much more in each other's world, and it's I guess parents can somehow imagine that they might be able to manage whether there is that competition among siblings or not, but it's pretty natural and it happens organically, and I think it happens a little bit independent of the parenting, and depending on a mixture of other qualities, it can be really toxic and painful, or it can be encouraging and motivating and exciting.
Yes, you reference the Bronte sisters, the writers, multiple times in the book, and there's one passage that I really loved. You're right. This was talking about parents, particularly the type of parent who is sort of a living legend, larger than life figure. And you're right, Susan. They unleash an arrow of ambition and are often surprised to find that they can't control that arrow's direction. And then you continue, the Brontes helped me see that the siblings are often the ones who help guide the direction of the arrow into the future. Sarah, do you feel like that with your siblings? Did they help guide you?
I think more than anything, they were just incredibly supportive with whatever I did. Up until adulthood, they at different points when I was starting off my career as an athlete, there's not a lot of security in it, so they let me stay with them until I really found a grounding for myself professionally. But yeah, there was never any question in my mind that they were going to be my biggest supporters, my biggest fans, and that's something that I heard from those Kieran brothers, where it's just they knew that there was that unconditional love, less about drive and more just about support. If you needed it, it was there for you from your siblings.
Mm. And Lauren Groff, what do you think? Were your siblings in any way helping to guide the direction of the arrow for you?
Oh, immensely. Absolutely. My sister is the only person in the world other than my husband who read one of my first failed novels that I ever wrote. And she, of course, right, she responded in the best possible way. She made this like incredible lithograph print that I still have hanging on my wall just to show me that, she loved and supported me despite the fact that it was egregiously bad, my book. She, no matter what, they are both sort of my the stars in the sky that I steer by. They're very different people. Sarah, she's like a font of love, and Adam is marvelous, and I will never reach Adam's heights in a lot of ways, and I will always, be guided by the arrow of him in a very real way. So, being the middle child, I feel was an extraordinary experience because I had two very different kinds of pressure from above and, below, even though everyone loves Sarah. Meaning like I was squeezed in both love and, focus. It was really wonderful.
Hmm. Well, let's take a call here. We have David who's calling in from Duxbury. David, go ahead.
Hi. I just couldn't resist calling. My wife is the youngest of 14 children
Wow.
from Vermont, the Tebow family, one of the Tebow families. And she still goes to lunch with three of her surviving sisters every Friday.
Oh, that's so special, David. How does that compare to your own family? Did you grow up with siblings?
I'm one of five children, so that's nothing compared to her family.
It's little compared to that. Well, thank you
And the
so much.
interesting thing is,
Yeah.
at family reunions, they would talk about their parents, and they would talk about them as if they were two different sets of parents. The oldest, second oldest child is a girl. She was not allowed in the barn, but by the time the younger kids, they were mostly girls, they were allowed to do farm chores.
Hmm. That's a very
So the
different
father changed.
expectations.
Yes.
David, thank
Have
you
a good day.
for calling in. What you just said echoes an email that we just got from Paulette, who writes, I am a 72-year-old oldest sibling of six kids. I was the only girl with three younger brothers and two sisters born when I was 12 and 14. One of my sisters is a doctor, and whenever we meet new people, my mom would introduce my sister as her daughter, the doctor. And yet my sister still feels like she isn't recognized by her brothers as being as accomplished as they are. Crazy, isn't it? Yes, well, every family dynamic has a bit of craziness in it. I can attest to that as well. Let's pause here for one more short break. When we come back, we will keep talking family dynamics. We'll also take more of your calls. 800-639-2211 is our number. This is Vermont Edition. Stay with us. Welcome back to Vermont Edition. I'm Michaela Lafrac. This hour, we are joined by Susan Dominus, a staff writer at the New York Times Magazine. She's the author of the book, The Family Dynamic, A Journey into the Mystery of Sibling Success, which came out in March. We are also joined by two sisters who Susan featured in the book, the acclaimed novelist Lauren Groff in Orford, New Hampshire, and the triathlete and Olympian Sarah True in Lebanon, who is also studying clinical psychology. Sarah, I got to ask about that. Are you studying anything that's related to this book? Did you feel like when you were, in your classes or doing your research, you were like, "Wow, my family is really providing fodder for what I'm interested in academically"?
I no, although maybe I should do some family work. I mean,
Mm,
no, so far I've only been really thinking about working with individuals, but I think Sue's work really just highlights how important the developmental stages are. Like we carry childhood through with us for the rest of our lives. I want to work with adults mostly, and you can't help but just really acknowledge that childhood, you the foundation is laid in childhood, and you can't really escape it. So being part of this project is, Sue's book has been really wonderful to really reflect back on, my own process in life and how I am the way I am. And honestly, a huge part of that is the influence of my brother and my sister.
hmm. Uh, are you two? Actually, I would love to ask this of all three of you. How are you all reflecting on and maybe changing what you learned as kids from your parents into your as you are parents now yourselves, and is there something that, Susan, I'll start with you, you've been chewing on as you research this book that made you realize, hey, I'm gonna do this a little bit differently as I raise these twin boys?
I think that I wrote the book in part because, like many parents, I wanted to maybe make sure I didn't screw this aspect of it up. But the only times I mean, I've made many parenting mistakes, but in a way, the biggest mistakes I made were when I departed from the way my parents raised me. My parents also raised me in what Lauren called benign neglect. And if anything, in fact, I was born a little overachiever, and my mom would sometimes just say, "Just turn it in and get a B already." You know what I mean? They weren't obsessed with any of that stuff. And my mom used to try to talk me into taking a day off from school so I would go to Brooklyn and visit her mother with her because she didn't like going alone. And I would say, "I can't miss a day of school. I have to take a test today." So they were very laissez-faire, and they wanted financial security above all for their kids. And I think I was a little bit more uptight, frankly, than they were when it came to my own kids. And those moments of trying to, force a class on my kid or something like that, an AP, because I thought it would X, Y, or Z, those are really the moments that, like, A, did not turn out well, and B, that I regret. My parents also put a tremendous amount of culture in front of us. Just we were a very museum going family, and they also believed a lot in just the great outdoors. Like over the summers, we weren't going to robotics camp, or we were just running around at summer camp. We were able to do that. So those are some of the things that I emulated. But as for and also I would say the family that felt in some ways most familiar to me was the Paulus family, because they were raising their kids in New York City and they were very, very interested in the arts. And their daughter was living the life that I actually would have liked. In other words, she was being put in front of opportunities at the American Ballet Theater and going to, taking piano probably at Juilliard and doing children's theater in New York City. I was a suburban kid who longed for that kind of thing. But instead, my parents, what they gave me was a very ordinary, healthy, safe, stable childhood. And that had its, huge pleasures as well. I'm not sure I answered the question, but obviously I have a lot of thoughts about it.
No, I think that's one version of the answer. Is not necessarily what you would do differently from your parents, but what you were trying to hold on to that they did right.
Yeah.
Lauren,
Yeah.
do you see
Yeah.
your own parenting style as particularly similar or different to your own parents now that you're raising multiple kids?
I Don't actually know. I think that's one of the experiences of your face is so pressed to the pattern that you can't actually see the whole rug.
Yeah.
Like I'm so in it. But I do have to say, I do think what my parents did extraordinarily beautifully, and what I sometimes struggle with is they understand the profound specificity of each of their kids, right? They really understood how we were down to our very innermost quick. And so I'm trying to do that. And I think that that is the basis of true and generous love, right? Understanding the specificity of all things around you, but in particular, the small people that are growing up to be adults. And so I'm trying to emulate that very, very much so, which means that, my kids are very different. They need profoundly different things. So being able to provide what they need at the times that they need it, understanding that they're malleable, changeable humans, that is something that I try to recenter almost every day.
Hmm. And Sarah?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest takeaways from our parents was just they modeled a lot of great values to us. So they're incredibly hardworking and they had interests outside of us. And I think, when you're a kid, you see your parents working hard, you see them having these things that they really are excited about that have nothing to do with you. And those are the types of things that you take away are really, really formative.
Hmm. One of the other
If I could
through.
jump in, I would
Oh,
also say that
please.
I would just say that one of the things I admire about the Groff parents also is they don't really frame it this way when they talk about their own careers, but they really had lives of great service in the sense that Janine, their mom, was a very good science teacher for many, many years. I think very exacting and demanding, but very good at what she did. And she was, I have greater respect for no one than teachers. And their father was a doctor and medical provider, and so I think that that sense of purpose was also in the background for all of the Groffs, that they had opportunity, they had talents, and that they would put them to really good use. Sarah wasn't just content to be a world class athlete. She really used her own experience to raise awareness of mental health. And all three of them, I think, have great conviction about what they're adding to the world, and it's something I really admire about all the Groffs.
Yeah. Well, this drive to create well, even if it's not conscious, but the creation of an exceptional family, a family in which your children are thriving and succeeding, but also just simply happy. It can still come at a cost, and you see that in a number of the parents that you focused on in the book, Susan. Mothers in particular, there can be a great deal of sacrifice. And I'm wondering if there are any stories of that familial sacrifice that stand out to you now.
Yeah, I will say that more than the success that the parents had in creating a culture of ambition, I think I was most intimidated by the element of sacrifice that I did see in some of the stories. Teruko Lawrence, who was a seamstress who had immigrated from Tokyo and married someone wonderful, but who didn't earn enough that they could send their kids to take advantage of the opportunities in New York that they wanted them to take advantage of. And she really did work herself to the bone, sewing very high end placemats and curtains for the elite of the Upper East Side and Palm Beach. And she was exhausted for a lot of her life, and I think her kids really recognize how much she did to make their very exciting, fulfilling lives as a director, as a media innovator, as a professional harpist possible. Or the Murguia's mother, same thing. She was feeding a family of 7 kids, many times a day, as well as whatever neighbor dropped in. Just the amount of work. I was very humbled by that as somebody who could barely, do my job and keep my 2 kids in, healthy meals.
Yeah.
So I do think that it doesn't come easily. Or the Chen family, for example, they also worked, I think, 6 or 7 days a week for many, many years, very long hours, absolutely exhausted, so that their kids, they left their entire family behind in China so that they could offer their kids the American dream. And in their case, it really paid off. But by the way, the other thing that comes with your children's success, in the case of the Chen family, for example, who grew up in a city called Bristol in Appalachia, is that the kids leave. It's like you do everything for them. You're in a small town, and her children now live in Boston and San Francisco, and they have these really beautiful, glittering lives of success, but they're far away. And I don't know if she knew all that was coming, when she made sure that they had every single opportunity available to them in their area.
Yeah. Oh, well, on a similar tone, we just got an email from a listener named Caitlin, which I think is important to share. Caitlin writes, I'm really enjoying the discussion today, but just wanted to add a point that not all sibling dynamics are good ones. I grew up with a severely mentally ill sibling who required most of my parents' physical, mental, logistical, and financial resources. It was often scary and occasionally unsafe being around my sibling, and continues to be the driving force in our sibling and family relationships to this day. My parents absolutely did their best at all times, and I'm in my 40s, married, supporting myself, but still feel overshadowed in the family by the needs of my younger sibling. Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing that story with us today. And yes, Susan, as I'm sure you deeply know, there are so many family ways to create a family, and some are within your control, and some are not. Yeah.
Yes, this woman's experience is actually not uncommon. I think being the only sibling of a severely disabled sibling is really challenging, and there's been some great writing about this. But there's surprisingly little academic research about it. And I think there's a recognition that there needs to be more of an understanding of what happens to that sibling who is overshadowed by the needs. I will say I didn't really focus on this in the book, but in many of the families that I wrote about, they're in part because they were big families sometimes. So the odds just increased, but there was often a disabled sibling, such as in the Murguia family. But there were so many siblings that they had each other, and they also, I think it was very maturing for them. Not that they would have wished that for anyone, but both maturing in that they felt they couldn't be they couldn't burden their parents, but also maturing in that they saw that there were all kinds of different people in the world and ways to love. Now, I think this, what this woman wrote in about is a very tough and extreme situation. But I do, yes, as you say, there are so many different permutations. And there are also just siblings who are, by fault of no one, diametrically opposed in values and sensibility, and just don't get along and are a source of pain for each other as well. I wanted to write about families whom I found inspiring, and that's where I went. But obviously, sibling relationships can also be extremely disappointing and painful.
I want to share one more email we just got from Jane, who writes that the biggest argument my brother and I ever had was a completely theoretical discussion of what we would ever do if he became the governor of Vermont and I was still a journalist in the state. I thought it was unfair of him because I'd have to recuse myself from political coverage if he was governor. And he thought it was unfair of me to demand that he couldn't pursue this opportunity just because I thought my career was more important than his. The argument was ridiculous. He didn't even live in Vermont and had no interest in a political career, and I no longer cover daily Vermont politics. But what strikes me is that as mad as we were at each other, there was never a moment where either of us thought the other couldn't reach the highest level. Sure, there might be intense sibling rivalry, but no one believes in you and your potential for success, notwithstanding how it might affect them, like a sibling. Well, thank you so much to Jane for writing in. And thank you as well to our guest today, Susan Dominus, the author of the new book, The Family Dynamic. Susan, I learned so much reading this book. It really made me reflect on my own family. I'm one of 5 girls. So thank you so much for joining us.
If only I'd have known it, I'd have asked more questions. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah and Lauren, so much for everything.
Lauren Groff is a renowned author of many books. I recommend all of them. I've read all of them. Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to be with all these people I love so much. Thank you, Michaela.
And Sarah True is a triathlete, a 2-time Olympian, and a PhD student in clinical psychology in Lebanon, New Hampshire. Sarah, thank you so, so much for your time.
Thank you, Michaela.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have for today. Tomorrow, though, I want to let you know if you are a fan of the Vermont Green FC, tomorrow is your time. We want to hear from you. They are gearing up for a big national championship game. And if you have been to one of their games this season, you know they are full of energy. What has gotten you hooked on the Vermont Green? Email us at vermontedition@vermontpublic.org and join us for our conversation with WCAX's sports director tomorrow at noon. Today's show was directed by Aaliyah Papes. John Ahrens is our managing producer, and Andrea Lorian and Daniela Fierro are our producers. Our intern is Callie Knuxerl, and today's call screener was Rick Barrett. Our theme music is by Myra Flynn. I'm Michaela Lafrac. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch up again soon.